Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us here on ASTV. Joining me tonight for the Coaches Parley, red hot Ryan Wood, the Rocket Man, I guess. And then we replaced Mike Stagg because you get to look from Sean below. Sean Mullen here working our 3-on-3 overtime game. I think our game was a little bit better than the Winnipeg Jets game last night, boys. I was quite the debauchery of the last 7 minutes. In case you missed it, in case you didn't miss it, we'll have some thoughts on that coming up right now because we're going to jump right into the show, and we're going to talk about the first week in the NHL. Sean, if you had a chance to catch a couple of games, what surprised you? What did you like most? Give us a little bit of a synopsis of the first week of the NHL for you.
I think it's sort of typical of the start of any season that there's some surprises that people are overreacting to. You know, like the Buffalo Sabres win a couple of games, and all of a sudden everyone's saying, oh my, watch out for Buffalo. Let's get through 10 games before we start to think Buffalo's not in the basement like usual. You know, Detroit started a little better. Winnipeg started terribly. Montreal started terribly. These are things you can evaluate. But, I mean, any team, this always happens in my mind. If you go on a 4-game losing skid to start a season, then it's disaster. If you go on a 4-game losing skid in January, it's put in context. So I always think at the beginning of the season, we have to think in those terms instead of all of a sudden expecting that those first 4 games are going to signify what the team does the rest of the year.
Ryan, what's your take on that first little bit of hockey so far?
You know what? I love when teams that all the professionals write off before the year has even gone on. Everybody puts so much stock in individual players, and you know, names are built up, and when those names underachieve or names that nobody knows really yet and somewhat quote unquote overachieve, I think it's amazing for the league. And having the same teams win over and over and over again is not entertaining. And when you see teams that are at the bottom of the standings for the last few years start winning some hockey games, it rejuvenates their fan base, and it's great for the business side, and I think it's fantastic.
One thing I will say at the beginning of this regular season on time in October as opposed to January in a shortened season, but also the reintroduction of the actual divisions. I mean, seeing the Northern Canadian, seeing how the Canadian teams finally playing against their American counterparts. I mean, you have to remember from March 11th to playoff time, the Jets didn't play anybody in the United States. And that is a huge difference when you think about these. I mean, it's only 3 games. I mean, 2 West Coast teams, 1 Minnesota team. And yeah, I mean, 1 point out of 6 on a road trip. And you can say all the great things and bad things, but I'm looking to see how that dynamic plays out the first part of this season because it's a different travel schedule. It's a different hockey game, period. And it'll be interesting to see. But like you said, Sean, it's all about context. I mean, because we have nothing to value it or evaluate the first 4 games or 3 games of the season, because you go 0-3, all hands are up, firings are going on, players are going down, players are going up. I mean, I'll ask you this question because this is somebody that's been in, I mean, Winnipeg's minds over not the last couple of years, but certainly before then, ex-Vancouver Giant Evander Kane. Finally, has he reached his last straw in the NHL, do you think? Or do you think you see him skating up for another team again?
Nah, it's pro sports. Last straws are few and far between if you're good enough to still play. I think he'll have a hard time playing in San Jose again. I mean, that's all indications are that the team is fed up with him. So I think he'll have a hard time playing there. But someone will give him a chance. Tony DeAngelo got a job. You know, Evander Kane is an exceptionally talented hockey player. He obviously comes with a whole van full of baggage, but he's young and talented enough that someone will give him a chance again. But if San Jose were to take the drastic step of buying him out, then that chance will come really cheap and short term. If they don't, they're probably going to have to eat a fair bit of that contract to move it. So it becomes a real complicated situation for Doug Wilson.
Do you think he regrets signing him to a 7 years, $7 million deal, Ryan, back in the day?
I mean, you can't predict the future, unfortunately, and there's no crystal ball. when it comes to being a GM in hockey. I mean, you put your faith in somebody, and clearly Evander Kane was showing something that to Doug Wilson that he was a trustworthy and somebody that they can rely on, and obviously things have kind of gone off the rails a little bit, and he's had a tough little while with the off ice issues with his ex-wife and her saying the things in terms of the gambling. And I mean, at the end of the day, hockey players are still human beings, right? Nobody's perfect. People make mistakes. And it's what you do when you make those mistakes and how you learn from them. And I mean, I think Evander Kane is saying all the right things right now. This whole COVID thing that he did, I think it's a big mistake. And I mean, I don't know what he was thinking. I'm not in his shoes. I mean, but at the end of the day, he's going to face the consequences, and hopefully he learns from it and he gets the help that he needs, because clearly he needs some to get his life back on track. And I wish him all the best. I mean, he's not probably really caring if I wish him all the best, but I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that want to see him succeed. I mean, he is a good hockey player and he's a great elite athlete. And I mean, he's good enough to play in the NHL. I mean, he's just got to clean up his act off the ice. And if he does that, you're right, Sean, there's no reason why somebody is not going to take a chance on him. And they might get him at a reduced rate because of it. So, hopefully that happens.
It's interesting. I mean, with gambling, as long as you don't gamble on the sport, I'm going to be forgiving if someone has an actual addiction, because that is a thing you have to battle through. The COVID violation, it was a dumb move, and dumb enough it could be criminal. So that's where like the question came: can they terminate his contract? Word is they can't. So since they can't terminate his contract, I don't know what San Jose's options are going to be, because trading a $7 million a year player in this situation is going to be awfully challenging. But what's getting lost in all this talk is that it's not like he's a fading all-star. He had 49 points in 56 games last year. He scored 20 goals, something like 6 straight seasons. And he's as good and consistent a goal scorer as you're going to get in the NHL outside of the upper echelon top 10 guys. So his talent's still very much there. It's just a matter of, whether you trust him in your room.
And that is a very the managing of the man versus the strategy of the team is the difference here with this young player. And I mean, he's not young anymore. I mean, he's
30.
been around the league. He's got about 8 or 9 seasons under his belt, I'm pretty sure. So it's not like he's not that young pup that's 25. I think he's realizing, okay, maybe this is, maybe he does need some help, and hopefully he does find some. Last question before we go on to out of the NHL, gentlemen. Any surprises? Anything that caught your eye? I mean, I've been watching. No offense, I've been watching the networks in the South, like the TNT and the ESPN coverage, and I gotta say, I'm pretty impressed seeing Wayne Gretzky behind the desk. It's kind of fun listening to him and how they're bouncing the ideas at him, and seeing Charles Barkley getting some shots taken on him, and of course our girl Leah Hextall and Jennifer Botterill on stage there under the south of the border. Anything catch your eye on the ice or off the ice with the NHL?
I myself personally have been able to just see a few games. And the one thing that I've really, really liked is some of the commentators that have kind of switched places into these roles with ESPN. I really like, the deliveries that they're providing. It doesn't sound as homerish as it did, I felt, when it was on the other network. So I feel like they're still more neutral, as opposed to, all right, we've got to make sure that we cheer loud and hard for Boston, Washington, Pittsburgh, and Tampa, because those are the ones that we've got to get into the finals, right? So I like the fact that there's more of a complete delivery of there's no Homer lovers going on right now, which is great.
I like, from what I've seen, one thing I like on that side of it is some different faces. I found that the American coverage has been so consistently the same people for so long. Keith Jones, Mike Milbury, Ed Olchuk. There hasn't been a lot of new faces in the mix. And so it's been nice with the bigger money deals. They brought in some different names to, bring some different opinions and some higher profile guys too. So I think that's been a good fit, and it's made the games look a little bit higher class to have some of these upper echelon guys. As far as league surprises, and like I said, it's awfully early, but certainly the thing that stands out in the early going are some of the teams that I didn't think would be very good that at least have been competitive so far, like Buffalo, Detroit. Neither of those teams has lost in regulation yet. Ottawa's 2-1. Minnesota, who I didn't think would be very good after getting rid of those two guys, they're 3-0. And San Jose and Anaheim are better than I thought they'd be. So there's some teams off the hop that I thought would be bottom dwellers that aren't, which at least if it holds up at all for at least a few of them, will give us a little more parity and variety than we saw last year.
Certainly, I look forward to seeing how this season pulls out. Ryan, last word to you.
I think that with the salary cap, I think that the league as a whole is so close, and everybody is a bounce away. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, look at Seattle. Seattle doesn't have the offensive firepower that a lot of some of the other teams do have, but they're fighting tooth and nail every single game. No, are they Vegas when Vegas came in? No, Vegas got lucky, and they, the rules changed for Seattle so that they couldn't, secure the players maybe that they wanted. But at the end of the day, the parity is so good, and it's so much better than, a sport like basketball, where, one player in basketball can change the whole landscape of a game, where in hockey is a total team sport. I don't care. Yeah, McDavid's and McKinnon's and Crosby's of the world can change the game in a certain period of time or make things happen. But, there's still a bunch of other players on the ice that are equally as important. And, that's what I just love about the sport of hockey. It just is such a total team game.
One little extra thought I had early, I think I'm already starting to see some teams that are going to regret these $9 million defense.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's what is the play? Who is the player? The player's playing for the player. Their pockets are happy.
Well, and they're all, so many of these guys are paid way above their ability. They're getting paid Leon Draisaitl money to be a number 2 defenseman, if that, and that's going to be an anchor in the cap for a while.
100%. Hey, I was at the game Monday night, Leafs against the Rangers. I'll tell you, the Rangers played a perfect road game against the Leafs, and a guy like Mitch Marner was invisible all game, and there's a reason why the guy continuously will have a bad rap here in Toronto. And Kyle Dubas made a massive mistake by caving in and giving that guy the amount of money that he got. He didn't deserve it, and he doesn't deserve it. And, mark my words, that's going to be a contract that's going to eat at the Toronto Maple Leafs for a very long time.
And now Morgan Riley's going to want $9 million too.
And Morgan Riley is a great defenseman. Is he worth $9 million though?
Well, their backup
where
goalie
the Maple
from the
Leafs going to get
University
it?
of wherever is getting paid chump change. I mean, they can't even pay him.
Yeah.
Well, amateur
Another
tryout
good story.
contract. At least he got an amateur.
No, definitely not. We'll leave it there, gentlemen. We'll take a quick break. We're going to come back to revisit a conversation we had last show. The watering down, and is the writing on the wall to maybe have a bit of a reformation in junior hockey? Stay with us here on the Coaches Parley. Back here on the Coaches Parley with my boys Ryan Wood and Sean Mullen. Ryan and myself and Mike last show had a conversation about the fact that there are too many junior hockey players in Canada or the leagues just are watered down, that we're not seeing efficient and proper ranking of players? Ryan, do you want to touch on that and kind of explain a little bit more where you're going with that?
Well, I think that there are so many junior A leagues across Canada, and I think every league across Canada has different business models. And I think that there should be rules and regulations based on how your business model is in the game. If you are a pay to play junior hockey program, you should be considered tier 2 or tier 3. If you are not pay to play, and other than the players having to pay billet fees or maybe an equipment fee at the bare maximum, then I truly believe that you should be considered tier 1 hockey, and you should be in a completely different league. Same thing with drawing power. I think that if you're, a team like I'll just use the North York Rangers in the Ontario Junior Hockey League, drawing, 60 fans a game, is that really what junior A hockey is all about? Or is it supposed to be more like the Brooks Bandits, where they're packing a building and actually, the operational side of things? I just think that the operations should dictate the type of program that you are. And it's not fair to some of these kids who are such talented players get stuck because they sign as a 16 or 17-year-old in a program that's pay to play. And then when they're 18, a team like the Brooks Bandits or the Chilliwack Chiefs of the BCHL come knocking and they want you, but you're not allowed to go unless you pay a stupid amount of money to give it to the OJ team, because they need the money, because they don't have sponsorship, they don't have fan bases. And I think that as a whole, there should be 3 leagues at the tier 1 level that is, for junior hockey players that want to play NCAA, and make it an elite league that would be comparable to the USHL. And they can have 3 divisions: a North, a Central, a West, the Central, and an East, and take all the teams that operate like major junior programs. And that should be a way to make the talent level in Canada want to stay and not, go down to the US and have to play because they're stuck.
Yeah, I think a hurdle would be, are there enough of those teams in certain areas to keep the travel bearable in certain geographical areas? But I'm with you on, how can the same league, as an example, if you're all in an Alberta Junior Hockey League, everybody's playing for the, but you can get traded. If I sign a card there, they can trade me to another Junior A team, but they have different rules on who's paying what for the players. I mean, that seems absurd to me, that I can sign you up, tell you, I'll sign you to Brooks, tell you that you don't have to pay anything billet fees, and then I can trade you to a team where you have to pay. That doesn't make sense. The same league should have the same rules. If you're in this league, this is how your players are looked after. If you're in this league, they all pay $2,000, or they all pay billet fees, or they all pay nothing, whatever. If you're in the same league, the rules should be the same across the board. It's that these teams are struggling to survive and hold on, that they're letting all these rules be a little different depending on the organization. But it makes it seem Bush League to me, because what other level of sport could you have different rules and different pay structures depending on the team in the same league? Doesn't make sense.
Look at our buddy Harry. Look what he's having to deal with. The guy's in a pay-to-play situation. It's hard to recruit guys as it is, and you're not getting the grade A quality talent to be able to compete with the Steinbach Pistons of the world, where nobody's really paying anything to be there anyways, right? So, I mean, it's an unfair scenario for teams like that are in it for the financial business to break even or make a couple of dollars, where some of the other teams are in it to break even, or maybe, okay, we're going to lose $100,000 this year, and we're going to have a cash call with all of our rich board of directors that, is going to sit there and throw in $10,000 each because, well, it's my hobby and I got $10,000 to piss away that I can do that. Right. So it is an unfair advantage, and that's why I truly believe that. Listen, those teams that have more money should be able to go into a completely different division. It may be an elitist thing to say, but at the end of the day, money talks, right? So if you can put your money where your mouth is and make a division of all the teams that draw no less than 500 fans a game, that should be like a minimum. You must draw 500 fans a game. You must have X amount of I don't know, staff members. You got to have a trainer. You've got to have all these certain things in place. And if you can put all of those particular programming in place and execute it and get everybody to buy in and on board, there is no reason why you cannot have a league of all of the teams that are considered the elite of the elite. And then those tier 2 teams that want to develop kids and make money, and there's nothing wrong with that. Now they can be feeder systems. And guess what? Those teams that don't charge, okay, standard fee, you take one of my guys, it's automatically $5,000 or $2,500 or whatever, and make it a set fee, because now you're not going to have arguments. Now you're not going to have dads and moms involved because this team won't let me go because of money, or I don't want to go play. I'm not going to send this kid to the guy over in Estevan, and whoever's in Estevan, I apologize. I'm just using you as a random name, but I'm not going to send him to the coach in Estevan because, well, 6 years ago, he beat me when I was assistant coach on, Humboldt, right? Like there's a lot of pettiness that goes on in junior A hockey. And I think if some of the pettiness got taken away and you get more people in a boardroom that could actually see a vision, I think it would be so much better. But right now you got too many old boys that are in there, and then you got people that are forward thinkers like the BCHL that go, you know what, forget it, we'll just do it ourselves because we can't get people to think, big picture. We're very small minded, and people in Canada don't like change, and it's a hard thing to accept, but change needs to happen. It's a matter of who can implement the change and get people to buy into it. And I don't know who that is, but if it happened, oh man, watch out. There's so many opportunities that could be out there. TV and marketing and all that stuff.
One thing that has to be, like, regardless of which way you go, there's got to be consistency.
Yeah.
You can't have different rules and different structures for teams in the same league. It just doesn't make sense. If you're paying $20,000 to play in Surrey and guys are getting paid to play in Penticton, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't work. You can't have a league like that.
No.
It has to be even across the board.
You mentioned, the one thing that strikes a very thick chord with me, guys, is, you do get a player that gets traded from, a community that doesn't have a paid to play model involved, and then they get traded to that other team that has one. That parent family may not be able to support that hobby anymore for that 18-year-old kid, or they may not be able to make that transaction work. And not only does the team lose out on the trade aspect, but bigger picture, that player falls out of love with the game and he stops playing, or she stops playing. And all of that is because of the business of the game. And sure, we can fall across the line and say, oh, it's just part of the business. It's part of what happens. No, that's not what it's meant to do. I'm still a firm believer that there is a place for these leagues to progress players into the next level, whatever the level may be. Doesn't always have to be Div 1. Doesn't always have to be the NHL or the WHL, which we'll get into in period 3. But at least the player wants to play, and he has a good compete level to consistently play at that level.
Let me ask this. I know we're talking about, like, if you have the money, be at a higher level. I think that'll be a little challenging because I don't know if there's enough teams. But one thing I talked about as COVID was going on is that there might be a reset in junior hockey in that teams have just been spending more and more dollars to try to get to a certain level of, the rich teams have 7 coaches and video equipment and scouts and all this stuff. And then the other teams are scrambling to catch up, and that makes the discrepancy even bigger. Maybe, if only a few teams can do that, maybe they should have some regulation on how much money you can spend on operations in these leagues to keep the gap from being too expansive. Like, I know you want to give kids the best of what you can offer, but just because you have a super rich owner, say I make $1 billion and I decide to put a junior A team in Gull Lake, Saskatchewan, just because I can then hire Mike Babcock for $5 million to come coach my team doesn't mean I should be able to do that, right? Like, if you're going to be in the same league, it's kind of a version of the salary cap in a way. You can't put a cap on player spending because there's not really salaries, but there shouldn't be one organization spending $10 million a year on operations and another spending $2 million. There should be some kind of a standard and maybe a limit so that these teams are operating in the same league and we're not seeing such distinct tiers.
Well, look at the budgets, Sean. I mean, let's look back to OCN when they were, in their glory days, right? I mean, look how much money the band was spending every year for that organization. $1 million, 1.2 players are getting paid out the wazoo, and they were winning championships, right? I mean, if you look at across the board, and you can even look at leagues that do have pay to play situations, but you look across the board of the Canadian Junior Hockey League of how many players and leagues and teams, you look at those teams, excuse me, how many of them at the top are winning, and whoever are winning, if you looked at their books and you peeled them back, I can guarantee you that their operational budgets are significantly higher, and they have way more money than everybody else. And it's very few and far between when, those low budget teams make a dent into a league. They just can't. They just are unable to attract the talent. And unfortunately, with social media, with the internet, it's very easy as a young hockey player to identify, oh, this is the cool place, I got to play there. And all those guys migrate to one spot because it's the cool place to be. It ain't cool to be in Cochrane, Ontario, but it sure is cool to be in Spruce Grove, Alberta, right? Like
no one's ever said that.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying Spruce Grove is always a team that competes and wins, right? So, right. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, even in the Northern Ontario Junior League, you look at the teams that win. I could tell you the 3 seasons that I was in that league, the teams that won the championship, I could tell you did not collect the same amount of player fees as I had to when I was with Kirkland Lake. It just didn't happen. And you mentioned about the salary cap, the Western States Hockey League. And I mean, I know that they're, but they were actually doing okay back for a while in in the Western United States. They had a good footprint going, and they had a bunch of teams, and they were trying to eliminate the same teams winning over and over and over again. The El Pasos and the Ogden Mustangs, because they would draw and they could bring kids in for free. Well, they made a rule that said, okay, it's a pay-to-play league. You must show that you've collected at least $120,000 in player fees, and it goes into this particular account, which the league was in charge of monitoring. And people would get fined, and people would it was actually a great idea on paper. But again, there was always ways to manipulate the system. Oh, the coach would, here you go, this is little Johnny's fees. Meanwhile, it's coming from the rich owner, right? So, I mean, unfortunately, the ability for people to be upfront and truthful and honest, and do what's right for a league as opposed to ego and I've got to win. Everyone looks at winning more than what's generally best for the league. And that's the biggest problem that happens in junior hockey as well is, well, I got to win because I want to keep my job because I don't want to go and get a real job, right? I want to be a coach.
But if I went and joined a boxing league of me and a bunch of guys who weren't allowed to be bigger than 5'5" and 120 pounds, then my victory wouldn't mean very much. Every once in a while, one of those guys might be just an outstanding fighter and they'd clock me. But for the most part, I'm going to win those fights. But what does that mean? And that becomes the issue in these junior A leagues. and that if there's no equality in the league, if there's no competition, the same teams win every year, then I don't care. You're not impressing me. Nope. You're just that much richer. So what? So and there's always ways to overcome regulations. Look in the NHL. Tampa Bay sticks Kucherov on long-term injury reserve. He probably was ready to play sooner, but then they're able to bring him in for the playoffs. There are ways around it, but at least make it tough. So if you had a standard, and I don't know what a junior A team would spend in their overall budget, but if you want the leagues to be better, then you set both a ceiling and a floor for operation expenses and say you can't spend more than this, but you must spend this amount to be in this league. So then you don't have those teams that don't belong, but you don't have the teams that are crushing the other ones to a point where it's not fair. And then you set across the board rules on player fees, and you go from there. Otherwise, you're just playing yourself into oblivion and irrelevance when you know that 80% of the league has no chance, and then the fans and the players don't care about those teams anymore.
Well, look at the North American Hockey League. I can use an example. I remember when I was refereeing in the North American Hockey League, I don't know how many years ago it's been now, but I remember there was a situation where the owner of one of the teams in Minnesota was losing his shirt, and he owned a Tier 3 team, and he was trying to manipulate the system by offering kids the opportunity to be on his Tier 2 team, which is supposed to be not pay to play, but he would try to run it through his Tier 3 program. And he got caught and got in trouble, but all he was trying to do was pay the bills because, he was in a small town, Minnesota, not drawing fans. And again, his team wasn't winning either, right? So you could tell the operational side of things, he's paying his coach, a local guy, $10,000 to coach the team. You get what you pay for, right? And unfortunately, money is what makes the world go round and round and round. And but that North American Hockey League, clean that up, and they're very, very diligent on this is our program, this is our league. It costs $550,000 American dollars to buy a franchise in our league. Players are not allowed to pay, so you better make sure that you're going to have a good marketing person. You're going to be able to sell tickets and sponsorships because those are your only source of revenues, and maybe some merchandise and whatnot. But if you can't find a location where you're going to be able to generate $3 to $500,000 in revenues, then don't even bother spending the money. Or if you've got deep pockets and are okay losing $150,000, $200,000 a year, then sure, no problem. But it has to be a standard, and that's what the North American Hockey League has. And that's what the problem with is in Canada is that they do not have a standard like the North American Hockey League, which is why players continuously leave Canada to go down there to play on a regular basis. And
and if you and that leads to situations like if you go and sign with a team in one of these leagues expecting to be on one of the elite teams, and then like a Brooks or a Penticton or one of those, but they only have so much room in their roster, and all of a sudden you end up in merit. And I'm not trying to pick on them, but I'm just saying, and they're not spending the same money, and they're not even in the same league in terms of the budget for coaches and the budget for player development. Like, your league shouldn't be that scattered. There should be at least a standard that you're comfortable that the players are being looked after in the same, at least the same way. But if you're going to do that, then you can't let the other team just go crazy ahead of them. So yeah, there's got to be some kind of standard. You're absolutely 100% right. And until there is, the discrepancy grows, and then again, why do you want to be in that league?
Well, and the comments that I always heard is, well, as commissioners, because I hear it from commissioners. Well, who am I to tell somebody how to run their business? Well,
the commissioner.
The commissioner. It's your job to make sure that the league as a whole is fair for everybody. But you've got commissioners, and I'm not going to say names, even though sometimes I'd like to. You got commissioners across the sport in Canada that, well, I'm buddies with this owner, so I'm going to make sure that, I give him a little bit of leeway. And I like this GM, so I'm going to give him a little bit of leeway. oh, I like this head coach. He's a good guy. I'm gonna let him coach my, all-star team that's gonna go to a showcase, and then things get forgotten, and then everyone goes, well, he's not that bad of a guy. He's done a lot of good things for the league, but you're not doing anything for the league. You're actually hurting an individual hockey league by not making a standard when it comes to what teams should be operating as and why and how. And that is a huge issue. And a lot of that stems from, number one, geography, because certain teams, if you have a team in a certain area, in a certain location with 5,000 people in your town, why are you in a junior? Like, why are you considered junior A? Like, what? Like, why? There's so many things that I can just go on a rampage about how the junior A leagues are operated and ran and handled by so many different commissioners. But at the end of the day, there needs to be a standard, and it's on the commissioners. It's on the CJHL to get it together. It's on Hockey Canada to go, you know what? Like, yeah, this isn't right. How can Kirkland Lake play against, Penticton V's in a game, and they're supposed to be both considered junior A? Like, it's not. One league's junior A, one league's junior B, and there's some great players that play in the Northern Ontario Junior League, but it's not the same level of hockey as the BCHL, the Alberta League. Yeah, there's good players. Yeah, teams can get lucky 1 out of 10 times playing against one of those teams, but it's not the same level of play, and it's not the same business. And
you're allowed to put standards on stuff.
100%, you should.
It's a franchise. It's not. Why can I tell you to run your business? Well, if you want to own a Montana's, then you have to build a building of these specifications. You have to have this uniform. You have to spend this much on advertising. That's how franchises work. If you want a franchise, you must meet the standards of the franchisor. And that's what happens in these leagues. The commissioners are getting run by the owners, but the league should run the franchises and say, correct, we set the rules, you follow these standards, or see ya.
Yeah. And unfortunately, these commissioners, it all goes back to the dollar. Well, I got a nice $80,000 a year kosher salary. I don't want to piss off the ownership and the board of directors because, well, next thing you know, I'm going to be out of a job. And, well, I don't really know anything else because this is what I've been doing for 25 years. And, I'd be lost if I didn't have, being the commissioner of this league. It's my identity. It's all I know. But what have you really done for those 25 years? What have you done to make the league better? What have you done to evolve the league into 2021, 22? Are you still stuck in 1988? Or are you actually evolving as the league evolves? And a lot of these commissioners are old as dirt, and they should be bringing in more youth and people that are I don't want to say more knowledgeable about the game, because obviously these guys are knowledgeable, but they don't have the same level of expertise when it comes to the business of the game. They're not businessmen when it comes to the business side of it. Not all of them. There's a lot of good ones out there. So I don't want to be taking that out of context. But in terms of the business of hockey, some of these guys are just not taking it to the next level. And, I look at Commissioner Mark Frankenfeld. That guy turned the North American League into an absolute marketing machine. It is a marketing machine. I can't name a commissioner across the board, across Canada, that has done a marketing machine situation like Mark Frankenfeld has in the North American Hockey League, other than the BCHL. And then I'll be honest with you, the BCHL, they're their own marketing machine just because of those 4 letters.
And has that league really improved that much in the last decade?
They send a lot of guys to college. I mean, that's the telltale sign, right? Like, I mean, at the end of the day,
they did 10 years ago too. I don't think their business is any better than it was when I was broadcasting in that league. So,
I personally don't think the business is better. I think that there's still teams at the bottom end that need to have more of a standard, right? Yeah. But those programs that are smaller in that league, they they make a lot of money in the off season because they're in that league. You know, they run camps, they run spring programs, they, you know, they're you know, the rookie camps. They make a lot of money just because kids go, oh, I want to be in the BCHL. I don't care which team it is. I'll go play in Merritt. I'll go play, you know, for some of the lower end teams, Coquitlam or whatever. Sorry, Coquitlam's good this year. I apologize, but yeah, I mean that's a smaller organization. So yeah, I mean, I would really love to see a standard across the board in Canada, and if we're going to be tier 2 hockey, then you know what, make a standard, because tier 2 hockey should not be, you know, fees. There should not be any of that stuff. And there's a lot of owners out there that think the same way that I do when it comes to it. And if all those owners banded together and actually put their money where their mouths are and all climbed on the same train and got on board, they could have an absolute dynamite elite program and elite league, and it would compete against the USHL, and it would attract players from all over the world, and it would be amazing.
Last word to you, Sean, before we say goodnight.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's complicated. As we've said, the geography makes it complicated to create that sort of elite level league. But I do think they're going to be forced to reckon with themselves. Like, that's why the BCHL's making the moves that they've been making, realizing where the wind is blowing. And if you keep losing your best players to the USHL or the North American League that want to be NCAA players, then to survive and be relevant, these programs are going to have to find a way. You know, if you only have one or two elite programs in Alberta or in Saskatchewan or in Manitoba, like, that's not going to draw players there if the competition is not what it is elsewhere. So then, slow and steady, you're going to just bleed your players out to the point where you're essentially junior B anyway. So they're going to have to do something, and probably nobody wants to be the one to grab the bull by the horns and be the person responsible for making that big change. But if nobody does it, then it'll happen on its own, and it'll be worse.
Well, I know that it was supposed to be the last comment, Sean, and everything that you said is bang on. But I'll tell you right now, if the Greater Ontario Junior Hockey League, which is considered Junior B here in Ontario, and I mean, Theo, we both know that level of hockey is top notch. If those guys ever just decided to do the same thing the BCHL did and go, you know what, we're going to have our Ontario division, and the BCHL is going to have their division, and we're going to have all of our teams in one league, and the winner of our league is going to play against the winner of the BCHL, and that's going to be the national champion, you're going to get a lot of attention, and now it's like, oh boy, here we go. Problem is, BCHL has Hockey BC support. If the GOJHL ever decided that they didn't want to be a part of the Ontario Hockey Association, they're not getting the same level of support that the BCHL has, unfortunately. And that's another problem and another topic of conversation down the road for another Wednesday night.
And an excellent segue, Ryan. I really appreciate that, because we will get into that conversation. I think both of you gentlemen hit the nail right on the head when it comes to commissioners worrying about I guess the right word would be the strategy of what the league is supposed to be and what that is supposed to represent on a level playing field, whether it be all paid to play, whether it be all based on money revenues brought in and reaching certain standards. Like you said, Sean, if I want to open up a franchise, I got to meet the franchise standards. These guys are running teams in the league, and it's basically a free-for-all where there are some rules, but they found ways to break the rules or bend the rules in other ways. So I really appreciate your time, gentlemen. I know we've got busy schedules. Look forward to chatting with you in a couple of weeks. We will touch base on the rest of the leagues. I know we said we were going to talk about that tonight. We'll get to that in a couple of weeks, just because, hey, we got to have Mike and Ryan really, battle this one out. And I mean, Sean, great to have you back. I know you've been busy. What have you been running for? I mean, there was something you were showing on your social media post. You were working you were running for something, or you were doing a
Royal Bank has a race for the kids they do every year. So it's running for the Children's Hospital or other children's charities. So raised something like 20-something million across the country. So for children's charity, so it was great. Running 10K doesn't feel like it did when I was 20. Now that I'm 40, it's a lot harder on the joints. But I did want to say, as we're getting set to go, we're talking about junior A, but some of the same conversation can be applied to major junior too, because again, the discrepancy is too large between the big teams and the small teams at that level also. So that's a conversation that has to happen in junior hockey across the country.
Sean, really appreciate it. Glad you're doing such a great time at the RBC, and good. Hopefully you got a little bit of ice bags for the knees.
Yeah, thanks.
Right on. Thanks for joining us here on Coaches Parley. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. And, of course, bringing more goodness to the greatness. Take care of your friends and family, and really enjoy the rest of this last bit of fall. And if you are going out trick-or-treating, if you're able to, be safe and take care of the little ones. Thanks very much. See you guys next time. Bye-bye for now.